Good morning and welcome to the Legislative Minority segment of Live at the Legislature. My name is Ka'eo Kealoha Lindsay from the Office of Representative Ward. Joining us today is my boss, Representative Gene Ward, the Minority Leader from Hawaii Kai, representing District 17. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here again.
Today is going to be another hot topic that affects you, and I think the caucus is focusing on specifically this year, is the decriminalization of marijuana or cannabis. So last Friday they just had a hearing in which it passed out and made a couple of amendments, and wanted to get your thoughts on that. The first was the fine was lowered from $200 for possessing 3 grams to $30. So first off, what are your thoughts?
Well, it shows what I said is inevitably the case. We're teeing it up for recreational marijuana. If it's a $200 fine, it's actually a fine. If it's $30, it's a tap on the wrist, which means that decrim is basically going to morph. And now the Senate probably is pushing that, given what you said in the committee report, from a decrim to a legalization, recreational marijuana, which I think Representative Marcus Oshiro said, you pass medical marijuana and you've started the slippery slope from 3 to 5 years to recreational marijuana. So we're seemingly on that same path.
And to carry on to that point, which is sort of the slow creep towards legalization. In the committee report it says, your committees find that 10 states and DC have legalized the recreational use of marijuana, and there are others considering it. They find that the states that have legalized have avoided criminalization of thousands of people, reduced opioid overdose deaths and opioid disorders, lowered the number of arrests for driving under the influence of alcohol and other drugs. And they find also that recent polling indicates broad public support in Hawaii for that. So the purpose of the bill is to decriminalize, but in the committee report, it references specifically sort of the benefits of legalizing recreational use, and then in the bill it sets up a task force.
Let me give the contra argument to that, the lack of benefits. In fact, let me make an observation at about 30,000 feet. This is kind of a macro about what's going on in our society, and I'm borrowing it from a Scottish professor that wrote it years and years ago. He basically said this: democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidate who promises the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policy, or in this case, drug policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. So the point is, as we become beholden, and democracy is good because it's self-correcting, but if you go to the extreme of giving everybody everything they want rather than what's better for the society, he goes on and says this: the average age of the world's greatest civilization, including ours, has in history been about 200 years. We're at about 242 years in the U.S. experience since 1776. During those 200 years, nations always progress through the following sequence. First, bondage to spiritual faith. You know, the Pilgrims, we have suppression of religion, and then they have spiritual faith. From spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, and from liberty to abundance, and from abundance to complacency. This is where we are in America. We're at abundance to complacency, and then from complacency, we go to apathy, and from apathy to dependence, from dependence back to bondage. My concern is that not just the decrim, but it's the creeping nanny states. You're not going to have a plate lunch with styrofoam. There's no straws. We're dictating restaurant menus. We're legalizing infanticide, sanctuary states, and incentivizing, hey, you don't have to work. Remember, I'm the old Peace Corps volunteer. They said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Now the theme is, ask what the government can give you. My point is, we're at complacency with our abundance. And this thing about sapping the vitality of our youth through decriminalization of marijuana is just the wrong thing to do. I mean, for those who are thinking that this is good for society, I think it's missing, again, the macro 30,000 feet picture.
Transitioning to another sort of broad level.
Yes, let's
about
get away from the
future
doom and
of
gloom.
Hawaii.
The
And,
sky is not falling; it's just cracking a little bit.
And so you're of the opinion that Hawaii is not taking advantage of its strategic
We're underachieving.
resources.
We
Okay.
are underachieving. Any state that does anything economically, and one of the things we haven't done in this session is revitalize our economy. We are short. We are missing things like we can be the Hollywood of the Pacific, but yet we've got a group of people who want to take away the tax credit rather than increasing it. We could literally take over Hollywood. Second thing, we could be the Geneva of the Pacific. The Geneva of the Pacific, bring Kim Jong-un and Trump here to do peacekeeping through the East-West Center or the Asia-Pacific Security Studies Center. We have a great elite diplomatic institution. And thirdly, we could be the sports arena of the Pacific because everybody loves to come to Hawaii and we can compete in all the games, the races, and the cups that exist in the world. But what have we done? Well, we play around and we do management things. We don't look at the big picture at 30,000 square feet. So I'm looking for a little bit more economic revitalization because we get a lot of people who are just barely making it or leaving Hawaii. And we've got to look at those people who sit on the sidelines. Every one of these, Geneva of the Pacific, the sports arena of the Pacific, the Hollywood of the Pacific, are high-paying jobs. And this is not even to mention the Space Center of the Pacific, of which we have the proposal to do a moon base on the Big Island, and we're sitting on our hands and not promoting it. We should be doing these kinds of things, and it's not rocket science, even though that's about rockets going to the moon.
So is it just misguided funding, misprioritizing?
A lack of
certain
priorities.
things?
I think it's a lack of priorities. We get caught up in what's going at the grassroots micro level, and we miss the macro. That's why this session this morning, I want to say, let's go up to 30,000 square feet, colleagues in the legislature, Senate, and House, and let's look at economic revitalization, not just Airbnb and not just taxing the hotels more, but let's look about how our strategic advantages are not being taken advantages, and we're underachieving in what we can do for the people of Hawaii, particularly for their wages.
Last thing, we've got about a minute left. A lot of folks are going to be off work tomorrow for Kuhio Day.
Yes. You know, to make a holiday, you got to do something significant. It's Kuhio Day, and the significant thing he did, he put out a vision for the revitalization of the Native Hawaiians. Unfortunately, after 100 years, the 203,000 acres that were set aside with the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act now has only 9,700 homesteads. And sad to say, we're celebrating, with shame, 27,000 Native Hawaiians on the wait list. So tomorrow's a day to reflect. Tomorrow's a day to remember that Kuhio was a great man to do things for the Hawaiians, of which, because of federal and state lethargy, we have not been able to realize his vision, but we get a day off to remember it at least.
Representative Ward, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you again to the viewers at home, and thank you to Alelo for this segment. We will see you next week.